Welcome back to this week's midweek boxing talk. A lot of good news, a lot of interesting things are being popped up through social media on X or Twitter, whatever you'd like to call it, and some really things that grab a lot of attention. If the PBC's year was 2023, 2024 is shaping up to be a matchroom year. The things that so far have happened and the things that look like they're going to be happening moving forward, mind-boggling. Boxing fans can just be happy. Last year we had great fights, primarily the PBC, pushing a lot of huge matchups. And this year, what's going on, thanks to, of course, Turkey Ali Shika and Saudi Arabia in conjunction with Matchroom, is fire. So we're going to get into that today, talk about some of the rumors and speculation and some of the facts that are popping up and describing it and discussing it. So let's get to it. So there we go. Let's just start at this one. This was something that many of us talked about when we saw that Jerome Boots Ennis signed with Matchroom. This seemed to really be a great opportunity to open up the door between a possible fight between Bud Crawford and Boots. Obviously, many Errol Spence fans were pushing for this fight beforehand, primarily hoping it'd be done by the PBC and Al Heyman. But the big hurdle for this is that Boots Ennis is not a big name. He's not a guy in the U.S. that really at this point generates a lot of buzz, not because of skill or not because of anything of that nature, but mostly because of the way he's been built up and promoted. He hasn't fought a top 10 legitimate 147-pound fighter yet. He's been inactive. And even though we all think that he's super talented and potentially a pound-for-pound #1 fighter for the next decade, you got to do these things in the ring against legitimate competition. And he hasn't had that yet. And of course, for Bud Crawford, you're on a whole nother spectrum. This is a guy who's done everything he's needed to do. He could retire tomorrow and he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, some haters might not like that, but that's just the reality. Now, him moving to 154 pounds to become a four-weight world champion, that's fantastic. And it moves him closer to a potential super fight with Canelo Alvarez. Also, something that could get done thanks to Matchroom and Saudi Arabia. We'll get into that obviously later in this video. But it's being reported that this fight is in the works for later this year. We know that obviously Boots Ennis just signed with Matchroom. He's already got a fight scheduled. And Bud Crawford similarly has just been given a fight against 154-pound WBA champion Madrimov. And the way Bud Crawford and his team are pushing it, hopefully that WBO title is going to be connected to it some way or another. One rumor that I've heard recently, and I'm not sure if this is fact or not, but if Funduro doesn't fight the winner of Madrimov Crawford by a certain date, then the WBO will strip him and that title will go over to that winner. So if Crawford beats Madrimov, eventually he will become a two-belt champion at 154 pounds, which puts him in great position to become potentially a three-weight undisputed champion, which what's going on in boxing now, when we think about these kind of things, is just unfathomable. It was really shocking to see somebody become undisputed. Now it's becoming the norm, right? Now it's becoming shocking are guys that are multiple weight undisputed champions, something that a few years ago we never would have imagined happening. And now it's becoming commonplace. Obviously, Inouye is a two-weight undisputed champion. Crawford is a two-weight undisputed champion. Usyk has a big fight scheduled this month, and if he wins that, he's going to become a two-weight undisputed champion. I mean, that in itself already is putting 2024 at a very high pedestal. But let's move forward. Obviously, this is a great fight. If you're a Crawford hater, then you're happy about this because you think that potentially Boots could beat him. If you're a Crawford fan, we want to see him active in great fights before he retires, something that we haven't really got enough of, right? And obviously him signing potentially with Matchroom and being funded by Saudi Arabia, it gives him a lot of potential directions to go. Obviously, potentially unification at 154, a potential Jaron Ennis fight, potentially moving up and facing Canelo Alvarez, another fight that's been talked about. A potential rematch with Errol Spence if he becomes a champion at 154. So, this is all great news. Great news. So here we go. This is a fight that apparently just got discussed and looks like it's going to be added to the Bud Crawford Madrimov card, which for Saudi Arabia, Turki Ali Shika's first promotional based fight in the US, they're really kicking it. And let's go over it a bit. So Virgil Ortiz versus Tim Tszyu is reportedly being planned for a super welterweight clash on the Terence Crawford Israel Madrimov card August 3rd in LA. If Ortiz wins this fight versus Thomas Delorme this Saturday, show also reported to feature Isaac Cruz versus Jose Valenzuela, Andy Ruiz versus Gerald Big Baby Miller, and Leo Santa Cruz versus Abner Mares 3. Abner Mares 3 and Leo Santa Cruz, this is kind of the typical PBC rerun fight, but it's a fight that makes sense for both of them. They had two very good fights. Both guys won one. So now the third fight at this point of their career makes sense. Abner Mares, though, is a guy that I think is almost legally blind in one eye. So I don't know how much it really makes sense for him to be fighting. Leo Santa Cruz has been very inactive, hasn't fought since getting knocked out by Tank Davis. So it's a bit of a money grab. And, you have to appreciate a promoter still funding these guys and giving them an opportunity to make money and earn a living. The same goes for Jarrell Miller. We just obviously saw him on that Saudi Arabian card taking a loss. But even in taking a loss, he's still being put in with a big opponent in Andy Ruiz. If he beats Andy Ruiz, that loss fades away against Daniel Dubois, and all of a sudden he's right in the mix for bigger and better fights at the heavyweight division. For Andy Ruiz, a guy that was looking to get his foot in the Saudi Arabian door, this is it. You're fighting a guy coming off of a loss that Daniel Dubois just beat. You should be able to go in and do better than Daniel Dubois, even though stylistically they are a little different. And then, of course, you have Isaac Cruz coming off of becoming the WBA super champion at 140 pounds by kicking Rolly Romero's ass against Jose Valenzuela, who was supposed to be in conversation to be on this new PBC card, I think maybe the Canelo one or the Tank Davis one, against De Los Santos. So when I saw this, I was like, how's this going to work? Are they going to hope that he beats him and then this fight's going to happen? But we will hit the specifics of that later on. And then, of course, we know Ortiz is fighting Delorme. Nobody doesn't expect him to win that fight. Delorme is just a stay busy fight for a guy who's been inactive, having some health issues, and getting back in the ring. And obviously now him stepping to fight Tim Tszyu, coming off of the loss that he just had with Funduro. It's a great fight, right? Potentially the winner of Ortiz versus Tim Tszyu is another possible opponent for Bud Crawford at 154 pounds, right? And that's a big fight. I mean, regardless of which guy wins, that's a big fight. Ortiz has a very strong fan base. He's a very exciting fighter, 100% KO rate. And then, of course, Tim Tszyu has been on fire up until that eye issue or the head cut, which obviously led to him getting beat by Funduro and losing his title. But, this card looks great so far. I'm excited about it. The one thing that is interesting is the strong PBC presence. Mares, Cruz, Ruiz, Valenzuela, Isaac Cruz. These are all PBC guys, right? And we do know that apparently the PBC is going to be working with Saudi Arabia. So that maybe this was the first sort of deal worked out with Al Heyman and the PBC, just to give some of his fighters another opportunity to showcase themselves so that Al doesn't have to worry about putting on these fights to accommodate all the fighters he has. So these guys will get this opportunity. And maybe if things go well, then more opportunities specifically with the PBC will follow. And that's good news. I always thought the PBC should totally be getting on board this money train while it's there. When money is available, you don't poo-poo it. You don't fucking guffaw it. You don't go, you jump on it. And you exploit it for as long as you can to build up your fighters, to give them big opportunities, to fill their pockets full of cash, to highlight them so that when the money is no longer there, maybe you do have a legitimate pay-per-view star at that time where now you've profited, not just financially, but also promotionally from being involved with these people. Let's move to the next slide. So there we go. These are just a couple current pound for pound lists. Obviously, Michael Benson, a popular writer, talked about the Ring Magazine's current pound for pound. And Max, people remember this young kid that started making YouTube videos. Obviously, now he's not a young kid. He's becoming a man. And this is his pound for pound list based on, what he saw after this weekend's very surprising result. So let's go through his first, and then we'll look at Ring Magazine. So obviously he's got Inouye number 1, Crawford number 2. This is the norm. There's quite a few people that have Inouye number 1 and Crawford number 2, and vice versa. Crawford 1 and 2. Usyk and Canelo are usually right there around 3 and 4. Bivol and Beterbiev, they definitely deserve props because they're in it to win it. That fight's going to be huge. Lopez, a guy that potentially could have been a 2-weight undisputed champion. Ken Shiro. So Max is not your common American boxing fan because most American boxing fans don't even know who Ken Shiro is. They don't know what weight class he fights at, and they definitely would not put them on their pound for pound list. Tank Davis at number 9 and Bam Rodriguez at number 10. Bam, definitely a guy that's moving towards that position. I personally feel that probably him being on this list would make more sense after beating Estrada. If he beats Estrada, for Tank Davis, I always said I feel Tank Davis is a pound for pound fighter. But the problem is he's not fighting the kind of fights that pound for pound fighters should fight. If you look at Bam, he's been unified. He just had a huge unification fight. Ken Shiro has unified titles. Lopez, unified titles. Beterbiev, unified titles. Obviously, Bivol didn't, but Bivol fought and beat a pound for pound fighter. Canelo, unified titles. Usyk, unified titles. Crawford, unified titles. Inouye, unified titles. Tank Davis never has. And that's really my big negative towards Tank. He shows no indication or no inclination to go for greatness, to try to unify titles and fight great opponents. He's never fought a pound for pound fighter. He's also never fought in a unification fight, and he's almost 30 years old. So that's the only real issue I have as far as he's concerned. Like when he was at 130, it wasn't necessarily fighting Lomachenko. It was fighting any unification fight. When he had a huge money offer of, I think, $6 to $7 million to fight on DAZN against, what's his face? Tevin Farmer. In truth, that's an easy fight. I never felt Tevin Farmer would last 3 rounds with Tank Davis, but it was a unification fight. It's the kind of fight he should have jumped at just because he could have been a unified champion. But the fact that he wasn't even interested in taking that fight, it didn't bode well. And obviously now at 135, he's got opportunities to unify as well, and he's never shown any inclination to take any of those as well. So, when you look at Ring Magazine's new pound for pound list, there's also some issues with this as well, and we'll get to it as we break it down. Terrence Crawford, number 1. I agree. I have Crawford, Inouye, Usyk, number 1, 2, and 3 on my pound for pound list. Then you have Canelo, and I can't argue with Canelo being top 4. Obviously, both of them are the same. Beterbiev and Bivol, so he's got it a little switched from Max. They have Beterbiev ahead of Bivol. Obviously, Beterbiev has unified 3 belts. Bivol beat Canelo, right? Canelo, who's ranked on this pound for pound list. So regardless of how you want to justify it, I think it's fair that both of those fighters are right up there. At number 7, Errol Spence. I don't know how Ring Magazine actually has Errol Spence on their rankings. You could have a Shakur Stevenson. You could have Teofimo Lopez. Both of them are far more deserving at this point than an Errol Spence. And this is not me hating, but literally people were pissed off when Ring Magazine had Lomachenko still on the pound for pound list when he lost to Lopez. Yet that fight could have easily been a draw if Lomachenko would have won the 12th round. It would have been a draw on my card, right? So it was a very competitive fight. He did not get smashed. He did not get knocked out, right? And people weren't happy that he was still a pound for pound top 10 fighter. Well, then those people should really be upset that Errol Spence is top 10, because this guy literally fucking got embarrassed, smashed, and looks like he's never really going to be an effective fighter moving forward. We know generally people that get beat up like that over an extended period of time, they're never the same. And this is a guy that almost killed himself in a car crash. So there's no surprise he is where he is. Because if you get beat up in a boxing ring and it negatively affects you moving forward in your career, what the fuck happens when you're driving a Porsche, you shoot out the window, land in your face driving over 150 miles an hour? Like, you would think that's far worse than taking a beating in the ring. So obviously those two things combined cannot be positive for him. He should definitely take a lesson from Abner Mares, because look what happened to Abner Mares and his eye and everything else. Tank Davis at number 8, Bam Rodriguez at number 9, and Junto Nakatani at number 10. And to be fair, at this point, I would probably put Junto Nakatani above Ken Shiro on my pound for pound list. And as far as above Bam Rodriguez, it's pretty similar. That was a fight that I really wanted to see happen. Unfortunately for Nakatani, Bam sort of moved at a different pace than him, and they went opposite directions at opposite times. So that fight never did happen. And then, well, Bam was getting a big unification fight at 112. Nakatani was literally being ducked by the WBO champion in what's his face? Why can't I think of his name? Currently, WBA champion at 115, was the WBO champion, but he dropped the title to allow Nakatani to win a vacant title. And now he's obviously moved up to his 3rd weight division and now is a 3-weight champion. I'm surprised that Shakur is not on either one of these lists, because Shakur was looking dominant up until his last fight. And I think one bad performance does not mean you shouldn't necessarily be on this list. When you think about Ken Shiro has a loss on his resume, right? Errol Spence has a loss and got knocked the fuck out, right? So, just putting that in context. But let me know in the comment section below, which of these two lists do you fuck with more? I would have to say I fuck more with Max's list, because I definitely don't think Spence deserves to be anywhere on the top 10. I would prefer if Max had Nakatani on his list over Shiro, and then that list would be pretty damn fine. But, also he has Teofimo Lopez on his list, which I also agree with as well. But let's move to the next one. So this is Top Rank. Obviously, Top Rank is that underlier, right? Every year, consistently, they just put out great card after great card after great card. They don't rely on too much pay-per-view. They just consistently run the business of boxing, moving fighters into position to become champions, unifying titles, keeping people busy, putting on very good free cards on ESPN. And this is just a good sort of example. Over the next 2 months, this is what they're doing. Inui versus Neri, 4-weight world champion, 2-weight undisputed, facing Luis Neri, a 2-weight world champion, who obviously has a big history with Japan. Lomachenko versus Kambosos, 2 unified 135-pound fighters. Lomachenko, an ex-pound for pound number 1, a 3-weight world champion. This is for the vacant title. Obviously, the winner of this, moving forward, taking on bigger and better things. Fury and Usyk. Fury isn't so much a part of Top Rank, but obviously his fights are showcased on ESPN. Him and Usyk, obviously this is the first time since Lennox Lewis where there's been a heavyweight undisputed champion. So that's historic in itself. Navarrete moving up to his 4th weight division to fight Lomachenko's countryman, Baranchek, for that WBO title. And the winner of this very well might be Lomachenko's next opponent in unification. Obviously, when we say this, we're thinking Lomachenko versus Navarrete, not Loma versus his countryman. Taylor Kittrell 2 obviously was delayed again. They really have a lot of negative karma against both of them, but it's a great fight. Kittrell deserves the rematch, and for Taylor, he needs a good bounce back fight to make a statement after obviously being dominated by Teofimo Lopez in the fashion that he was. Beterbiev versus Bivol, great fight. We've been asking for it for so long, but thank God, thanks to Saudi Arabia, the money is there. It's part of the 5-on-5 tournament between Matchroom and Queensberry, and that in itself is a once in a lifetime type of card, something we've never seen in boxing. And I will be doing my Top Rank versus PBC 5-on-5 card later this week. So make sure you tune in, you check that out, and then give me your comments on who you'd like to see in that tournament. And then Xander Zayas. Xander Zayas, one of the top young up-and-coming prospects in Top Rank, is now getting a real step-up fight, fighting ex-154-pound champion Texera. And Texera's tall, long, has very legitimate power. If Zayas isn't ready or makes a mistake, Texera can definitely make him pay. So that fight is definitely something to pay attention to. Obviously, the Nui Neri fight is great. I'm really looking forward to it. Loma Kambosos, I think, will be great. Navarrete Baranchek. Navarrete is always in a great fight. Beterbiev and Bivol is obviously the fight I'm most looking forward to. Zayas versus Texera should be very entertaining. And Taylor Kittrell, I'm not sure how that's going to unfold, but obviously I think it's very deserving. And while Fury and Usyk aren't fighters I like stylistically, neither of them have a style that I, as a boxing fan, enjoy. I do appreciate the historical context behind it, but I wouldn't say that I'm a big fan of either one of those two fighters. And here we go. So obviously that Crawford card has been coming out. Crawford, Madrimov, Cruz, Valenzuela, Ruiz, Miller, Santa Cruz versus Mares. I mean, this is a great card for the first card from Matchroom and Saudi Arabia working in the U.S. Obviously, Matchroom puts on a lot of shows in the U.S., but it's nice to have the funding coming from Saudi Arabia so they can put on a real deep card. And this is just the prelim. Obviously, there's going to be other good fighters as well, younger guys that are sort of showcased by Matchroom and maybe by PBC, right? Because a lot of these fighters are PBC. It's great to see Crawford get back in the ring. I like Madrimov. He's a very exciting fighter. He does have some flaws, and it'll be interesting to see how Crawford deals with a guy who's a little unorthodox, kind of like himself, who is fast, unorthodox, and powerful. So it should be a very entertaining fight for as long as it lasts. I do predict that Crawford will win because I think Madrimov just hasn't been fighting at that level yet. And stepping up to face Crawford is quite the big step up. Cruz versus Valenzuela. I was interested to see Valenzuela fight Santa Cruz, De Los Santos, obviously to get revenge, redeem himself after getting knocked out by him. He came back and was very good in his last fight. Now he's stepping in and facing a completely different fighter. Short, powerful, great motor, a guy with a great chin. I do think that Isaac Cruz is just going to mow through Jose Valenzuela. And potentially the winner of this is a potential Tank Davis opponent moving forward. And then Miller versus Ruiz. It's a good fight. The two fat men going at it. I do favor Ruiz. I think he's just a better fighter, always has been a better fighter, more disciplined, and just technically just a better all-around fighter than Gerald Miller. But nonetheless, it's nice to see Andy Ruiz get on the whole bandwagon with the Saudi Arabians and putting some money in his pocket, which obviously is going to lead to bigger and better things moving forward. Cruz and Mares, I really enjoyed their first two fights. I thought I always preferred Santa Cruz over Mares. So I do expect Santa Cruz to beat Mares in the rematch in a similar fashion to what he did in the second fight. But nonetheless, it's great that they're both getting paydays. Obviously, they're both near the end of their career. This might be the last fight for either one of them. We've seen these kind of fights historically when we saw Leonard face Duran while they were well past their best. Leonard faced Hearns when they were well past their best. Jeff Fennick faced Azuma Nelson when they were well past their best. So this is not an unusual situation. I mean, we just saw Guerrero fight Berto in a PBC card, last year in November or October. So, this is something that, excuse me, often does happen in boxing. And I can't hate on it because it's not the highlight fight. It's not the main event. This isn't the fight that's going to be the pay-per-view fight, right? And we don't even know if this is going to be pay-per-view or what. I would imagine that it's probably not going to be pay-per-view because obviously Saudi Arabia is coming to the States trying to make a statement. So if you want to make a statement, you give this fight for free on DAZN, and American boxing fans are going to be that much more inclined to subscribe to DAZN, knowing that this is the kind of content they're going to get. Great card. I'm excited to see what else is going on, and I'm excited just to see that Bud Crawford is getting a big fight. I saw many people hating on Crawford for fighting Madrimov, but see, those kind of boxing fans, they're the problem. They're stupid, ignorant. They don't even know who Madrimov is. People literally were saying his name's wrong. They were literally calling him the guy he just beat to win the title. Crawford is not fighting Madrimov for a vacant title. Madrimov just won the title, right? And Madrimov beat a top guy to earn his title. Sure, he didn't beat Charlo, but it's not his fault. Charlo chose to go up 2 weight divisions to get payday against Canelo, meaning that everybody else had to continue moving forward with Charlo off the table. Otherwise, Tim Tszyu would have got a Charlo fight, and then other things might have happened. But unfortunately, you can't dictate your career on what one guy is doing. You have to continue to look after yourself, stay busy, chase those titles, chase your recognition. So hats off to Madrimov, Terence Crawford facing him. It's going to be a good fight. It's a solid card overall. Obviously, a lot of Latin representation. As I said, I did see that on the Tank Davis undercard, I thought it was, that Valenzuela was going to be fighting De Los Santos. But I guess that fight fell through, whether it was just a better offer to fight on this other card or the people involved just felt that they wanted to go in a different direction. So now apparently Edwin De Los Santos versus Gary Russell Jr. will likely happen on the Tank Davis Frank Martin pay-per-view undercard. Obviously, Gary Russell Jr. has more name recognition than any of these two fighters. So he is a good name to put on this, especially if you're trying to put him in position to potentially get a Tank Davis fight. And that is the writing on the wall for as far as I can see, right? Tank Davis just signed a 6-fight deal, and they don't have many opponents for him. You have Cruz, Valenzuela opponent, and then here you have Edwin De Los Santos, Gary Russell, right? That's 2 potential opponents for Tank Davis moving forward. One at 135, right? And then obviously one at 140 pounds. So they're all in that range where Tank Davis can make it. But, this is the writing on the wall that I see. The difference here is that Gary Russell's been very inactive. When was the last time Gary Russell fought? I can't even remember. Let's just check it out. Let's go to BoxRec and see exactly what the hell's going on with regards to that. Strategically, it'll be interesting. Obviously, Russell is trying to make a statement, trying to go in there and be more definitive in beating De Los Santos than Shakur Stevens. So then they could justify fighting Russell instead of Shakur Stevens if you're Tank Davis's team. Because you can say, look at how Russell dealt with this guy. He performed far better than Shakur did. So doesn't that mean he's a better fighter and deserves the fight more so than Shakur Stevenson? And obviously he's part of the PBC, so it's a much easier fight to manufacture as well. But let's just check out 135 pounds. Oh, sorry, it's Gary Russell, so I guess I need to drop down even further. Him coming up all the way to 135. The only weight he's ever fought at before was 126. He's never fought at 130, and now he's literally jumping up 2 weight divisions. I don't know if that's a smart move, but who am I to say? It just is what it is. So, Mr. Gary Russell. So, Gary Russell's last fight was 2022 when he lost his title to Mark Magsaia by majority decision in a fight that I felt Gary Russell won, right? So, people that call me a racist and a hater, I felt that Devin Haney could get a draw in this fight against Ryan Garcia. I felt that Mark Magsaia lost to Gary Russell. I just felt Russell was far more effective, even with one hand, than Magsaia was. But yes, that was 2022, literally 2 years ago. So for 2 years, this guy hasn't done anything, whereas Magsaia has had 3 fights since then, right? So I don't know if this is a cash grab for Gary Russell. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but for all the fights that potentially could have happened for Russell, this fight makes probably the least amount of sense. Because if you beat this guy De Los Santos, I mean, it's not really going to make you a household name. You're not really going to win that much respect. But if you lose to him, people are going to be like, yeah, who's surprised? You moved up 2 weight divisions you haven't fought in 2 years. But let me know what you think about this fight. Obviously, it's not a fight that I'm excited about, but I do see what the PBC is potentially trying to do, find potential opponents for Tank Davis. So here we go. We referred to this earlier. Michael Benson came out and said His Excellency Turki Alishika has revealed that he has plans in mind for both Canelo Alvarez and David Benavidez, but not fighting each other. He said he wants Benavidez to challenge the winner of Beterbiev Bivol, and he would like to see Crawford face Canelo. And we've already heard the whole Beterbiev Bivol situation. And I don't know how David Benavidez would literally walk away from an opportunity to face the winner of that fight for undisputed, being funded by Saudi Arabia, because easily it would be the biggest payday of his career. If he wins, he becomes pound for pound top 10. He becomes potentially pound for pound top 5. He becomes an undisputed champion at 175 pounds. And now a possible fight with him and Zerdo to become a 3-weight world champion by going up to cruiserweight is there. And we know there's talk about that. And that fight would be pretty intriguing. And Saudi Arabia probably would fund that as well. There's also a better possibility of him facing Canelo Alvarez, because now Canelo Alvarez could move up to 175 and potentially become a 2-weight undisputed champion if he was able to beat David Benavidez. And the money would be huge, huge, huge. But at the same time, a Terence Crawford Canelo fight. I know some Crawford fans, they're not really interested in it because they think people only talk about that fight because they want to see Crawford lose. That's not why I'm talking about it. I'm not going to talk about what other people think. People have their own opinions. For me, I've always said, for me, Terence Crawford doesn't need to fight Canelo Alvarez. There's other fights he could make. I was pushing him to fight Tim Tszyu. It's a fight that seemed to make more sense for me. And then to potentially fight Spence in a rematch, or Charlo if he ever does come back to boxing. All big fights, all big money fights. Obviously not as big as Canelo Alvarez. So if Crawford feels confident that he could move up to 168 and take on Canelo Alvarez, that's his choice. And he's his own man, and I let him do what he wants to do. And I made a video about this earlier on, I think at the end of 2023, predicting that I felt that if this fight does get made, Terence Crawford is going to win. I think Terence Crawford is unlike any fighter that Canelo Alvarez has ever faced. The only fighter he's faced who's similar in some ways, not specifically style-wise, but in just ring IQ, intangibles, and the ability to give Canelo the kind of looks that he just couldn't deal with is Floyd Mayweather, right? He's a switch hitter. He has good feet. His reach is much longer than Canelo Alvarez. He's got a punishing jab, whether he's snapping it out there or stepping into it. His power is legitimate. Obviously, he walks around pretty big. If we've ever seen Crawford, outside of the ring, he's in shape. but he's not skinny. He's not walking around at 147. He's walking around probably in his mid 160s, right? And doing some heavy lifting, showing that he's a very strong guy with a lot of muscle on him. So, well, I think, for him, he probably wouldn't be at his best weight against Canelo Alvarez. I do think that his feet, his reach, his speed, all potentially give Canelo Alvarez huge trouble. Canelo moved to these weight classes so that the fighters he was fighting weren't faster than him. And that's primarily who he fought. Bigger, slower guys, where now he had the speed advantage over them. But for him to face Bud Crawford, now he's the big guy who is lacking foot speed and definitely lacking hand speed as well, and length. Crawford literally could out jab him at distance. I think Crawford's jab is probably about 3 inches, maybe 3.5 inches longer than Canelo Alvarez, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see what it says on BoxRec. I think Canelo is like 70.5. I may be wrong, but then again, I may be right. And Crawford's listed at like 74, longer than Floyd Mayweather. So that's also something that needs to be recognized. And I don't know the legitimacy of these measurements, but this is what's listed. So you can only go with what's listed. Terrence Crawford, 40-0 with 31 KOs. He may never get to 50-0, but he's getting to that point where, legacy-wise, he is going to be challenging Floyd. Yeah. So there we go. I don't know if you guys can see it, but let's just go full screen right now. So 5'8" with a 74-inch reach. So I think he's the same height as Canelo Alvarez, but with almost a 4-inch reach advantage. Canelo Alvarez, 62-2. What a resume. Yeah, there we go. So 5'8" with a 70.5-inch reach. So literally Crawford has a 3.5-inch reach advantage over Canelo Alvarez, which he could totally utilize. Totally, right? The same way Lara was able to utilize his jab and movement to really embarrass and frustrate Canelo Alvarez early on in that fight. The difference is he wasn't able to sit down on any shots and earn Canelo's respect, which allowed Canelo to cut off the ring and start hitting with big body shots, which obviously he started to run away from and wasn't very effective. Canelo at this point is older. I would say his feet are slower. It's not going to be as easy for him to cut off the ring as it was to face when he faced Lara, when he was at 154, much fleeter of foot than he obviously is now. But there we go. So this fight is definitely a fight on the table, as we've discussed. And as far as Devin Haney, I ain't hating Devin Haney. Devin Haney lost. People lose. It is what it is. I think people that were dick riding Haney and fanboying him, a lot of people that criticize people for fanboying Lomachenko, well, they've just kind of been exposed because Lomachenko never got his ass beat like Devin Haney just did. Never got dropped again and again and again, hit with the same punch. I mean, literally, Lomachenko was knocked down once in his career by a flash knockdown from a straight right hand when he was too straight up in the middle by Linares. And that's the only time in his career. So, let's leave it at that. As far as Devin Haney, his career's not over. He's a young man. Hopefully he can learn from this. I definitely don't think he should be moving to 147, but inevitably for him and Garcia, 147 might be the weight that they need to fight at. And I definitely don't think either one of them are going to be challenging Boots Ennis at 147. No. But obviously it'll be interesting to see what he does moving forward. I'm a little disappointed, in truth, because if he would have beat Ryan Garcia, I wouldn't have fucking been sad. Not at all. That's what I expected. And what I was hoping for is that Saudi Arabian money would potentially help us get a Tank Davis versus a Devin Haney fight. But unfortunately, that fight is definitely off the table, right? Definitely off the table. Another fight we missed out on because people just won't work together, right? That obviously was a much bigger fight than Ryan Garcia. And we could say, well, if Ryan Garcia did this to Devin Haney, then of course Tank Davis will. But you can't really use the triangle theory. You can't give Tank Davis the benefit of the doubt and the victory in a fight that he's never been in with, right? So it's just a stupid way of talking about the sport of boxing. We have to see the fight, and only then can we really justify or judge how the fight would unfold. At this point, it's just all speculation. None of it's based on fact. So, anyone that's speculating and putting out a prediction, it's fine. Everyone can do that. But don't act as if somehow you know it to be true, because you don't. But there we go, ladies and gentlemen. So this week's midweek boxing talk, hopefully you enjoyed it. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. I appreciate it. And I will see you next time. Peace out.